Chapter 11 Aging of Elves. This is, for the most part, a clear manuscript written in black nib pen on 8 sides of 4 unlined sheets that Tolkien numbered in pencil 1 to 8. Some corrections and marginal notes were made by Tolkien in red ballpoint pen. It dates from c. 1959. For similar applications of the greatly increased rate of sun years to Valian years of 144 to 1 to specific characters in the Legendarium, see the text presented here as chapters 9, Time Scales and Rates of Growth, 10, Difficulties in Chronology, and 18, Elvish Ages and Numenorian. Aging of Elves. Adjustment must be made of these rates to fit the narrative, at least if the story of Maeglin's origin is kept as in the annals. For Maeglin is evidently of an age to desire Idril in marriage, but he was born in Beleriand. The date in the annals is impossible, SY 316. Maeglin would then be about 179 when Tuor came to Gondolin in SY 495, but he would be on the 100 to 1 scale be less than 2 years old in life age. Footnote 1. In the c. 1951 Grey Annals, Eöl took Isfin, Maeglin's mother, to wife in Bel 316, and Maeglin was born in Bel 320, 1147 to 8, and as amended, Tuor came to Gondolin in Bel 495 as here, 1191. That would make Maeglin 175 sun years old at that time. End footnote. Gondolin was occupied in SY 116. Footnote 2. CF 1144. End footnote. Isfin therefore cannot have borne Maeglin before, say 120, even if she refused entry to Gondolin, not wishing to be immured or escaped soon after Turgon compelled her to enter, so that at best Maeglin would only be 375 years old in SY 495. Thus, either A. the story must be altered, or B. scales of growth must be adjusted. A. Maeglin must be born at least 20 times 100 or 25 times 100 sun years before SY 495. That is, on present notation with VY reckoning ending at 1496, MY1 then beginning, about 2,000 or 2,500 years before MY 495, SC in 1,500 to 2,000 years before the coming of the Noldor in MY1. That is, since 1 VY equals 144 MY, about VY 1484-1486. This is difficult or impossible to work with if Isfin equals sister of Turgon, as is essential to the tale. If Isfin was rebellious at the time of the departure of the Eldar overseas, VY 1132, footnote 3. That is, at the departure of the Noldor from Beleriand to Aman in VY 1132, as in chapter 7, the March of the Quendi above. End footnote. As it might be said, were a few of the Noldor also, and that matters might be arranged so. Eöl was not a dark elf in the sense of being an Avar. None of these, in fact, existed in Beleriand, certainly not at so early an age, nor was he of the Teleri. There were a few of the Noldor who in heart were Avari, but marched because all their people did. Footnote 4. In red ballpoint pen, Tolkien subsequently wrote a vertical line against these 2 sentences as well as a checkmark and words, "Keep this." End footnote. Eöl was one of these. He did not wish for Aman. Either he already knew and desired Isfin and persuaded her to remain behind, or she met him in Beleriand when she too had refused to go at the last minute and were wandering alone in the land. In that case, the birth of Maeglin could be anywhere about VY 1232 to say 1400. If born in VY 1232, by VY 1496, Maeglin would have lived 264 VY times 144 sun years equals 38,016 years. but this is obviously impossible besides the fact that Turgon and Isfin were both born in Aman. Asterisk. This, at Middle-earth's 100-to-1 rate, makes him 380, or at rate 144 equals 1 makes him 264. And asterisk. The story must then be entirely altered, and Maeglin must also be born in Aman. His sinister character will then be accounted for by the fact that he and his mother and father were specially attracted by Melkor and grew to dislike Aman and their kin. They joined the host of Feanor. This would explain Eowl's skill in smithcraft, and were estranged from their immediate kin. Where B, the age or growth scale must be altered. In Aman, in the early ages, it was very slow. The Eldar then lived at valiant rate, 144 to 1, but also their youth lasted very long, and they were engaged in many pursuits of absorbing interest, so that they did not become mature or wed until aged over 100 VY or even nearly 200. This does not apply, of course, to the first generation, e.g. Finwë was born in Middle-earth sometime before VY 1085, when Orme found the Quendi. Say about 1050, in 1132 he was therefore already 82 valiant years old, and wedded Muriel somewhere about 1150, when he was 18 valiant years older, was about 100 VY. But this slow growth was only maintained in Aman under the domes of Varda. Footnote 5. Regarding the domes of Varda in the round world version of the mythology, see 10, 369 to 72, 375 to 8, 385 to 90. End footnote. Rate of growth under the sun soon quickened. For all periods relative to the narrative, it may be taken as 10 to 1. That is, from conception to maturity, the elvish Huroa in Middle-earth only took 10 times the period of men. By reaching maturity at 20, they then remained in long-lasting vigor with little perceptible change, i.e., the aging rate was 144 to 1, or in Middle-earth 100 to 1. As soon as the exiles left Valinor, the aging and growing rate increased. Those who had to make way on foot and cross the ice spent a valiant year equals 144 sun years on a journey after the doom of Mondos. This dreadful journey aged them all to an extent of about 2 valiant years or 72 to 1. As soon as they stepped on Middle-earth, the growth rate leapt to 10 to 1. Thus, those who were mature at the exile must add 2 life years to their age, or 1 if in the company of Feanor, before reaching Middle-earth, and then proceed at the Middle-earth rate of 100 to 1. Those who were immature, under 20 VY, must add 2 years, and then complete their maturity, if necessary, in Beleriand at a rate of 10 to 1 before proceeding to live at a 100 to 1 rate. Since this growth rate affected the Huroa as soon as conceived, the gestation period was about 9 solar months, times 10 equals 90 months. Asterisk. 12 times 9 equals 108 months, therefore 9 years, and asterisk. That being so, Maeglin, if born C MY 120, would be 20 at MY 320, and MY 495 will only have grown 495 minus 320 all over 100 life years, older equals 1.75 or less than 2 life years. He was less than 22 and younger than Idril, among her reasons for not accepting him. This will fit the later narrative fairly well, but will make characters such as Galadriel and Elrond rather older in the later ages. It, however, makes difficulties with Arwen and Aragorn. Thus, Galadriel was just mature, 20 life years, at the exile in VY 1495. She was therefore 22 on entry into Beleriand, and then lived at the 100 to 1 rate. At the ruin of Beleriand in MY 590, she was therefore about 28. Now, if Celebrian was born no earlier than SA 300, she was mature 20 life years in SA 500. By the end of the Second Age, in 3441, she was then 2,941 over 100 equals 29 life years older equals 49. By TA 100, her wedding with Elrond. Footnote 6. In the first edition, 1955, of Return of the King, Appendix B gives TA 100 as the year that Elrond wed Celebrian. This was changed to to 109 of the third age in the second edition, 1966. And footnote. She was therefore 50, not impossible, and inexplicable by the troublous times. Footnote 7. In contemporary draft materials, it is said that Celebrion should be older at her wedding than early in maturity because of the delay of the wedding by the troubles of the end of the second age. And footnote. If actually born much later, say 850 or so, she was 20, in SA 1050, and in TA 100, 2491 over 100 years older equals 45. But Galadriel would be in SA 300 about 31 life years, 28 plus 3, and in SA 850 about 36 and a half. Arwen was born in TA 341 as a correction. Footnote 8. In LR Appendix B, Arwen's birth year is given as TA 241. And footnote. She was 20 life years in 541. Therefore, when in 2951 she met Aragorn, then 20, she was 20 plus 2410 over 100 equals 44. At her betrothal in 2980, she was 20 plus 2439 over 100, still about 44. At the wedding in 3019, she was nearly 45. Aragorn was 20 in 2951, 49 in 2980, and at their wedding, 88. But it seems probable that Aragorn's life was similarly arranged, thus he grew to maturity as quick as a normal human rate, and then slow to the Númenórean aging rate of 3 to 1. He was thus 20 in 2951, but in 2980, 20 plus 29 thirds equals about 30. At wedding, 20 plus 68 thirds equals nearly 43, and so close in age to Arwen. At death, he was 190 equals 20 plus 170 over 3 equals nearly 77. Footnote 9. In the first edition, 1955, of Return of the King, Appendix B, Aragorn, born March 1st, 2931, was said to have died on March 1st, 1521, thus aged exactly 190 years, as here. In the second edition, 1966, the year was altered to 1541, with Aragorn thus departing precisely at the age of 210. And footnote. In conceiving Eldarion, Arwen joined her husband's rate, and so, at Aragorn's death, 100 years later, 45 plus 34 equals 79, an old woman. Footnote 10. This last sentence entered as a marginal note in red ballpoint pen. And footnote. The only way of making Arwen younger at their meeting was this: the half-elven lived at the human rate. Footnote 11. As first written, this passage read, Eärendil was not allowed to return to Middle-earth. The half-elven / since their mothers took on mortality at their wedding or conception, i.e., then aged at human rate / lived at human rate. I have taken the slashes to be an indication that Tolkien considered deleting the text between them, and since that passage is moreover an incomplete thought, I have removed it editorially to render the passage grammatical. I have also joined the passage on Eärendil to the discussion that follows. And footnote. Eärendil was only 39 when he came to Valinor. He was not allowed to return to Middle-earth, but he obtained the grace from Eru via Manwë that his children, being half-elven on both sides, descendants of Idril and of Luthien, should A. have a choice of which kindred they should belong to, and B. should in each kind have a long and fair youth, as C. should only slowly reach maturity, and that this should extend to the second generation, thus Elrond, Arwen, and Elros, Vardamir. Footnote 12. As first written, this passage read, and that this should extend to the third generation, thus Elrond, Arwen, Eldarion, and Elros, Vardamir, Tar Amantil. This appears to be the only suggestion in Tolkien's writings that Vardamir was like Arwen among the half-elven, and so likewise had a choice of kindred. And footnote. To Elrond, it was thus granted that he should return toward the ancient growth rate. He reached maturity at 20 life years only in 1,000 sun years, rate 50 to 1. He was thus 20 in SA 100 minus 58 equals SA 942, When sent by Gilgala to the war in Eregion, SA 1695, he was therefore 20 plus 1695 minus 942 over 100 equals 27.5 life years, which is suitable. At the end of the second age, he was 20 plus 25 equals 45 life years, and at his wedding in TA 100, he was 46, only 1 year older than Celebrion, see above, which fits well. Elrond at the end of TA 3021 was about 75 life years in full elvish vigor. If Arwen had the same growth rate, she was born in TA 341 but did not reach maturity, 20 life years, until TA 1341. In 2951, she was therefore 20 plus 2951 minus 1341 all over 100 equals 20 plus 16 equals 36 life years. In 2980, she was still of much the same age, and Aragorn, by above reckoning, 30. In 3019, at their wedding, she was nearly 37 life years, but Aragorn 43. She then acquired the lifespan of her husband after the birth of Eldarion in 4A1. In 4A100, therefore, she was 33 Númenórean life years older, or 70. Eldarion was mortal and was not by promise included in the grace of Eärendil, but he had in fact a long youth, which took the form of remaining like a young man from maturity at 20 until 60 without change. He then lived another 65 years, making him 125, but in life age 20 plus 65 equals 85. His descendants became normal, but long-lived, 80 to 90. Footnote 13. As first written, this passage began, Eldarion was mortal so that his long youth was of modest scale. He reached maturity at 60 and then lived another 65 years. End footnote. Elros had the Númenórean scale of life 3 to 1, but the grace of long youth took the form of doubling this. He thus should have become mature at 60, but in fact became so at 120. He then lived at the Númenórean rate and died at the age of 500 voluntarily and therefore not at very great age. He was therefore actually in life age 20 plus 500 minus 120 over 3 equals 20 plus 127 equals 147. Vardamir lived to be 391 and so was little more than normal Númenórean age 300. Footnote 14. According to the line of Elros, Vardamir lived to be 410, UT 218. And footnote. Succeeding kings lived for about 400 years until Queen Vanimelde, the 16th ruler, mostly because after maturity they remained young for a long time. With regard to those born in Aman, it might prove useful to increase their growth span. Thus, the maturing rate of those born in Aman should be 50 to 1, and this should continue in the second generation. Those begotten in Beleriand or Eriador of 1 or 2 Aman-born parents. Thus, Galadriel would not be affected, but Celebrion, born in SA 850, would not reach 20 life age, for 50 times 20 equals 1,000 sun years, i.e., not until SA 1850. She would then be a young girl at the time of the ruin of Eregion. In TA 100, she would be only 20 plus 3541 minus 1850 all over 100 equals 20 plus 17 equals 37 life years. If born in SA 350, she would be 20 life years in 1350, and in TA 100, 20 plus 3541 minus 1350 all over 100 equals 20 plus 22 equals 42 life years. Finduilas was about 21 life years when Tyrn came to Nargothrond in FA 490. If she was 12 in VY 1495, the youngest exile, she was 14 in VY 1496. She then needed 6 life years for maturity, whereas one born in Aman, 6 times 50 equals 300 sun years. She was thus 20 in MY 300 and in 490 was 5 years older, equals 25 life years. This will not work. Footnote 15. A rough note in red ballpoint pen in the top margin of the page apparently refers to this passage. These reckonings are defective as they do not realize the growth rate was doubled in 1496. End footnote. There follows a series of rough attempts, much revised, apparently to find a chronology that would make Finduilas younger when Turin comes to Nargothrond in FA 490. Footnote 16, CF 1183. And footnote. What appears to be Tolkien's final scheme appears in the left margin of the last page of this text, but note growth rates doubled in 1496. Footnote 17, CF Chapter 7, The March of the Quendi above. And footnote. Finduilas, the youngest exile, was 12 in 1495. During 1496, she grew at a rate of 25 to 1. Therefore, in 144 over 25 years, she grew 6 years. She landed in Balerion at 16. She then resumed the 50 to 1 growth rate and needed 4 times 50 minus 4 equals 196 sun years to complete maturity. She was therefore 20 in MY 196. In MY 502, she had lived 306 more years at 100 to 1 and so was 23. It is unclear what the significance of First Age 502 is to Finduilas' life. In no version of the Annals of Aman or the Tale of Years did Finduilas survive to FA 502, but rather she died no later than FA 496, C 1192. A possible explanation is provided by some obviously contemporary draft materials in which it is said of Idril that Idril should be rather older than Maeglin. When Tur reached Gundulin in Bel 495, he, born in 472, was aged 23. Footnote 18, CF 1179-51. And footnote. But when he wedded Idril in Bel 502, he was 30. Idril should be also about 30 in Bel 500. To be 30 in Bel 500 required 2 life years on journey across the ice from Aman to Middle-earth. 16 life years at growth rate 12 to 1 equals 192 to reach maturity, and then 12 more life years at 144 to 1. The journey to Middle-earth took 144 sun years but counted as 2 life years, 144 plus 192. We still have to alter the arrangement during the march from Aman, BY 1496. This occupied 144 sun years, but it was so horrible that the mature aged as a double rate 2 life years during that time. The immature should also have aged at a double rate at 6 sun years equals 1 growth year. Thus, an Elda going into exile in VY 1495 at 12 growth years would, by the end of the journey, if female, only require another 6 growth years for maturity equals 36 sun years and would therefore become 18 in SY 36 or VY 1496. Footnote 19. This calculation implies that the double growth rate of 6 to 1 for the immature exiles continued for at least 6 years after reaching Middle-earth. End footnote. At the end of VY 1496 and arrival in Balerion, she would have had another 108 years at the 72 to 1 rate equals 1.5 life years, and therefore be 19.5. She would then resume the 144 to 1 rate, and in Bel 502 would be only 502 over 144 years older, or about 3.5 life years. She would be 23. This fits fairly well. If we make Idril 18 at exile in 1495, she was then mature and lived rest of her life at 144 to 1, save the year of journey equals 2 life years. She was therefore 20 when she arrived in Balerion, and in 502 would be 23.5. If Idril was 20 at exile, she would be 25.5 in Bel 502. This makes her a little older than Maeglin, and still vastly older in experience, which is better for the narrative, and the marriage of Turgon can be rearranged. It would thus seem that Tolkien took the date of Idril's marriage to Tur in Bel 502 here and mistakenly applied it to Finduilas' chronology. This is a convenient place to give a further detail found in still other, very rough but apparently contemporary drafting in red and blue ballpoint pen. Gil-galad became king in Lindon under certainty or sway of Galadriel about SA 10 to 20 after departure of Galadriel and Celeborn. He must then have been at least 25 life years. That is, 25 in, say, Bell 610. Thus, born 25 minus 6.10 equals 18.90 VY before VY 1500 equals VY 1481.1. Well, if we make Idril 18 at Exile in 1495, she was then mature and lived rest of her life at